Great. Oh, we're live. Okay. Well, what a treat. Welcome, everybody. I'm just going to let kind of people come along who are here for the live coming in. Just to let you know, you need to subscribe to the channel to put comments in the chat, and please do that because I'll be keeping an eye on that as we go on today. So just subscribe and then you can kind of do comments. Please say hi as you come in so that I can see that you're there. I can see the viewers thing there. Just come and say hi as you come in. That's great. Well, this is launch of our Bharcs season. Welcome, ladies.
Hi.
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 So this
Hello.
is a treat. This is a real treat. So the whole point of the season really is to really showcase the wonderful things that are coming out from Bharcs as a platform and as an educational provider. The inspiration of which comes from the wonderful Cindu, of course, and anybody who's read Cindu's book, it's such an amazing book. But also what's so great is, you know, it's how we individually filter this stuff and how it comes out from our own perceptions. And we have the wonderful ladies who have come through Bharcs as students who are doing their own amazing things. And it just has this kind of organic effect. And over this season, we're going to deep dive into individual topics. The point of today, we've got loads of people saying hi everybody, great to see you all, is that we want to start off by really looking at, well, what is the Bharcs way? What is Bharcs about? Where did Bharcs come from? And do you know what, Cindu, we'll start with you to give us a little flavor of that genesis, if you like. But I remember early on the friction around that, because it was this, well, hang on, there's not really this reliance on treats. There's not really this structure that we had before, and maybe that isn't positive then. And interestingly, when I heard some of those rumblings, it reminded me back even to some of the things that colleagues like Sheila Harper and others experienced back in the day, because they were looking at more about the relationship and the connection with the dog, not necessarily what we can do with primary reinforcers, you know. And I think, and that's interesting. So let's start with that then, Cindu. Where did it start for you? What was the genesis for Bharcs?
Yeah, and you're right. I think sometimes thinking back to the genesis does start giving me anxiety because it wasn't a smooth start, right? I started out, I suppose, like most people, looking for, I got a dog, and I said, I want to be perfect with my dog. Oh my God. The thing that I set up for, I want to be perfect with my dog, perfection. Anyway, so started out with looking at training and so on and so forth. And then I talk about this in my book. My dog Nishi at that time met with an accident. It was a horrific accident. A car ran over her face and she survived miraculously. But I think that kind of set me on a journey looking for answers to deal with the emotional fallout of something this horrific. She was in and out of surgery for a year. And anybody who's had to go through that with a dog knows that the kind of damage it does emotionally. And at that point, I think I began to realize that training was not going to give me what I was looking for. And I think that's really what opened my mind up to, I know I'm looking for something more than training, something different from training. And so my mind was open. And I think it was very fortuitous that I ran into people who were beginning to talk that language, Ture Drugas being one of them. And of course, that was the beginning of meeting multiple people who were like-minded and were beginning to question the idea of training. So it wasn't just positive training, but just training itself, questioning if that is really the most optimal way of living with dogs. Life with dogs, does that have to involve training? And I think it was disturbing, to say the least. But I did that journey. I did ask those questions of myself and start exploring what lies beyond training, and then started talking about it. But like you mentioned, it didn't go down very well because that people didn't understand it. I'm so glad that so many do right now, and I don't have to fight it that much. But at that time, I remember the kind of backlash we were getting. If it's not positive, then, it's aversive, because nothing exists beyond positive and aversive, you see. We don't know what we don't know, right? And I think that really was the problem that was plaguing me, plaguing our entire community. But I am not one to shy away from challenges, I suppose. So I just kept powering through and started Bharcs. I was consulting initially, and then I knew that I had to start teaching. And so I started Bharcs as a way to start educating people, and thus was born this community, this great community. And I'm from a tech background, technology. I worked for Yahoo, and so I just it naturally I ended up kind of moving everything online, and which was great because it started bringing to me people who didn't have to be close to me, physical proximity. And so Surabhi lives in the northern part of the country, and we are in the south. Eva is in Europe, and so none of these became barriers anymore, and we could continue to have a conversation. And today we're all over the world, which is very exciting. And we are ready to carry our message. And to anybody who wants to join our little village, this international global village that we have, we're ready. So we'd love to induct you if you would like to know what the Bharcs Way is and join us. We're here.
Well, this is what I'm hoping will happen as of course as we work through this season, that people get a flavor of these different things, and then they can find that platform. And one of the big things in the book for me was the humility, I think, from your voice in that book, especially as the book kind of takes us through that journey. And it's a reminder that this isn't about feeling criticized. It's about inviting us to think more. That's all. And then as we think more, we grow more. It's about individual growth. There's nothing, even the six of us in this room, we share very similar values, but we'll do things differently, and that's okay. That is totally okay. We've got to find our own way of looking at stuff. So yeah, I think that's a really important part of the book for me. And I think that's hopefully what we're going to offer during this season, actually. It's an invitation for people to hear these things and think, what does that mean for me? And I see value in that, and I can think about that. And it takes us down a path. Of course, we're on our journeys. We've been traveling for a while, and it's a weary journey sometimes, as you said, Cindu. It's quite it comes with its burdens at times, but people have to start somewhere, and I think that's important. So actually we can throw that open a little bit. We'll kind of go around the room a little bit. So Abby, I'm just looking at how my screen is here. Do you remember back in the day on the American game shows, they had them all on the different blocks? That's what I'm seeing now. So maybe we should do a quiz, like a game show. So Abby, tell me a little bit about your kind of journey to Bharcs and what appealed to you.
Yeah, I think that my journey with Bharcs started when we adopted our second dog, Mutton, who is a pit bull. And she came in with very, very different behaviors, temperaments, personalities as compared to my first dog, Lucci. I think with Lucci, we did go down the very conventional task-based, obedience-based approach. And again, as a first-time dog parent, as someone who'd never had dogs before, I think that's what I thought everybody has to do and should do. But I think that even in a few moments with Lucci, I think there were a few wake-up calls where I think I felt like this is not feeling right, or I am not feeling good about what's happening. But I also think that I wasn't emotionally and personally ready in my own journey to come to face with what those moments were making me feel, especially about my own self. I think the barriers to guilt and shame, to actually feeling some of those uncomfortable feelings were very, very high. And so those were not areas that I necessarily ventured into. I think I was just aware of the fact that there was some discomfort. And when we got Mutton, I just very, very quickly realized that she needed something very different. That some of the conventional stuff that I was anyway sort of moving away from was definitely not going to work for her. I also found, especially because of her breed, that there was a lot of focus on aversive, coercive methods. There was almost a very stereotypical way of viewing her as a dog, right? It didn't matter who she really was as an individual dog. All that mattered was her breed. And so everything just sort of fit into this, cookie cutter kind of approach for her that didn't work for me at all. and I've shared this story before, but I remember there was a time when, this is in the early days of our interaction with her, where we had a little bit of an incident where she snapped at me because I was trying to sort of move a bone from her while she was doing something. I was crossing over, whatever. And that's the first time that I had ever been snapped at. And I freaked out. I was scared. I was like, oh my God, what is happening? I reached out to a couple of people who had dogs, who were, familiar with the breed, who had also claimed to be dog behavior professionals. And largely the advice really fell in, oh my God, this is absolutely unacceptable. You have to nip this behavior in the bud, you have to nip this behavior in the bud. You have to take away the bones and make sure that you never give it to her till she doesn't learn that she cannot behave like this. Why don't you roll up a newspaper and, give her a whack on the butt just as a way to let her know that what she did was wrong? And there are all of these different things that were just not resonating with me at all. Because for me, in that moment, what I experienced in that incident, outside of the snapping and everything else, right? That's the behavior stuff that we can come to later. But I think what I experienced in that moment was she did not trust me. There was a breakdown in trust, and I could feel it. That she did not trust me. She did not know whether I'm somebody who is going to take something that's important to her away from her, or am I going to give her the freedom to just engage with it? And none of the advice that I was getting really addressed, how do I repair that relationship? How do I win trust again? How do I not just win trust, but how do I keep maintaining it? How am I supposed to communicate to her to let her know that, listen, this is not what I meant, that this was a mistake. I didn't mean this. And I think as I was sort of going through that journey, I discovered Bharcs. I happened to sort of come across their social media. And I think Cindu was, paraphrasing a couple of things that she had attended in a conference. And she had talked about, and again, I'm paraphrasing now, but she had talked about something about meeting scarcity with abundance and not more scarcity. And for me, that was the light bulb moment. I was like, this is it. This is what I'm seeking. And so that's how I found out about the foundation course, the K9 Essential 101. I signed up for it, and safe to say it was life-changing. Yeah.
And this is the wonderful gift that Cindu did by thinking about her own passion, creating a platform, putting that invitation out. And the word that you kept using a lot there was feeling. I felt this, feeling this, feeling that. And I think that's a common theme for all of us. We didn't think necessarily differently. We've started to feel something differently. And I think that there hasn't been in the past enough outlets to kind of explore that feeling. We'll come on to that a little bit in a minute, actually. We'll come back to you in a minute, Cindu, I think, on that, because of the connection with anthropomorphism and all that kind of things. I think that's an important topic. Thank you, Surabhi. All these wonderful people you see on screen, I remember during this season, they're going to be sharing their own individual kind of passion about what this means for them, and lots of different case studies and different elements as we build through. So it's going to be such a wonderful season that we can look at, and it's a chance for you as the viewer today to meet these wonderful people, and I think it's a great place to kind of make that connection. Eva.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about your story. And of course, we've communicated on kind of social media, but we haven't met before. So I'm really interested to hear your story about how you found, especially being over here in Europe, how you found that this was the thing that matched, I'm guessing, your changes in feelings.
Yeah. So it all started with
Sorry, Eva, before you start, I want to point out that we're debuting Eva on Dog CC. And so it's a big deal. So I'm so excited to hear what Eva has to say, because I've not heard it either. So...
No pressure then, Eva, no pressure.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, it all started with a wonderful Spanish sighthound that I adopted 5 years ago, and he's unfortunately not here anymore. But he was dog reactive, and training dogs never felt close to me. I could never point a finger what was not sitting right with me, but it wasn't for me. So I knew that I had to give him an opportunity for safe interactions with other dogs, right? So I started to looking at trainers, consultants, and it was really difficult to find a person that didn't have like this classic puppy classes where dogs basically have to do obedience in some sort of way. So I think I found like the only person in Slovenia that studied under Turid. So yeah, and that just got the ball rolling. And then I came across the PDTE podcast, which Cindu was a guest on. And when I heard her speak, I was just like, oh my God, I feel like this is what I've been looking for, right? So then I signed up for the Canine Essential 101, and I just felt I'm at home. And then I did the diploma, and as Surbi said, it changed my life. I know it sounds like a cliche, like I'm exaggerating, but it really changed my life because like I've been an empathic person from the start, but this gave me like empathy, love, and understanding, not just for dogs, because for animals, I always had that, right? But it was more difficult for me to transfer that to people, and especially to myself. And it gave me, like, I think the biggest thing was that it's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay to not know everything, and that actually not knowing everything is a good thing because you have an opportunity to grow, to learn, and that's just like so exciting. So yeah, that's a short version.
What was the name of, sorry that the dog's not with us anymore, but what was the name of the dog, Eva?
Beanie.
Beanie. Well, thank you, Beanie, as well.
Yeah.
This is the gift of these dogs. You know, Milo, who's here. Hello there. He's not with us anymore either. But Milo was the dog who really looked into my soul and said, you know, all that stuff you think, you know, you're going to have to think again, because I've got a story here and I really want to connect with you, but you've got to work out my story too. And I think that this is the gift. And actually, some of the challenges we have with our dogs in the present, that is just as much about the dogs we haven't met yet. Actually, I think it's a beautiful thing. Well, that's really wonderful. And the life-changing, I totally get that. You know, I think when we shift slightly our view of behavior generally and understand that many of us have been put into almost an enforced straitjacket of conditioning that we can start to wiggle out of over time. And it's very empowering, I think. Oh, thank you, Eva. Great. I'm really excited to hear more from you as we kind of move forwards. And you've gone in the deep end and you've swam through. So that's good. It's all good. All right, Anushri, great to see you.
Hey, good to see you all. Thanks, Andy.
Again, we haven't had a chance to chat in the group as such directly with Sajanya and Sarabi and Cindu. Obviously, you've all come in and spoken, but I've followed your work and so I know a little bit about you on that side of things. But I don't know much about your little journey into finding Bharcs and your own genesis, if you're right, your own little evolution. So please share with us.
Yeah, I think Cindu and I go way back, but I think with regards to Bharcs, I'd say about 4 years ago, Cindu. And so I used to work at a. Did you want to say something? I feel like
Yeah, I said your memory is going to be better on this. You should know.
Yeah. So I used to work at a shelter. I joined a shelter about 14 years ago. It was a trauma center, and I worked there for about 5 years. So I think I had the idea, and I, of course, grew up with dogs, but I also grew up in a very strict household. So it was this dual thing that had to exist for a very long time of, okay, I work in a trauma center, I'm understanding. Oh, sorry, it's okay, baby. I'm sorry. It's okay. I'm sorry. Yeah. So of understanding that the relationship is making the difference, right? There was I didn't really have to train in any aspect. It's not something that made sense to me, but I also understood the aspect of obedience, because as a child and for the most of my, life, that was the case in all relationships, right? So it sort of existed side by side for very, very long, until a couple of years ago, when I think those things really, truly can't exist. I think when you understand the deeper meanings of it, and I didn't realize that until Bharcs, until I adopted a dog called Snow about 4 years ago. His was a really hard case. Like, I have seen, and I've worked and continue to work with so many dogs who have been abandoned, and we try to rehabilitate and rehome them, and I couldn't figure it with this guy. I don't know what it was, and I hadn't come across Bharcs. I hadn't sort of started initiating conversation with Cindu at the time, so I actually reached out to someone else who claimed to have studied under Turid, and the stuff that they told me first was like, I feel like I wasted like a year there, right? Because this was a dog who was terrified. He was deeply insecure. Any sudden movements would elicit a bite. There was nothing in between. It didn't matter who. And I used to rescue a lot of dogs, and a lot of senior dogs at the time, right? Dogs who just were in shelters for really long and weren't getting adopted. So I had 6 other dogs at the time as well. And Snow, it became a situation where I think it was just unsafe for my other dogs, right? So I had to really figure out how to help this dog. And the advice that I got was to actually give a lot of distance. So not space, but distance, like isolate myself from him and let him understand that he needs to learn how to deal, and he needs to learn how to be independent, and he needs to, it's been long enough that he's been in this situation, and he's been like, it's been a year and he's still biting you. Like, you can't allow for that to happen, right? And so it just felt wrong. But I think there's also the element of there are other people in my house, and it's also a battle there oftentimes, because while I knew I didn't want to do training, I didn't know what else was there. I like many of us here, we didn't have access to, to what we know now. So, and when I finally was realizing, okay, this is not working, like this poor dog is actually like going deeper and deeper into this hole. Like, now he's reacting at every sound, every movement, he's biting, he's, and then I wrote to Cindu and I said, listen, like, I don't know what to do anymore. Like, I've worked at a trauma center, worked with so many dogs, but I'm failing here. Like, I don't know what's happening, right? And then when I started to get into it with Cindu and started the diploma, I think it was like a lifesaver, I'm going to say, right? Because it made me realize that the problem was here, right? Like, I kept trying to fix this dog and do things that this dog, should like have this checklist of how this dog should behave and stuff like that, but not realizing that I was the problem. My mindset was the problem, right? And I remember also, it's not an easy course. It challenges you, and it challenges you in the best possible way right now in the times that we live in, right? Because it really makes you go inward and become a better person. And I remember at one point in the course telling Cindu, she had given me some feedback about my communication, and that hit home so hard for me, because then I grew up in a house thinking that it's okay to shout when you're angry. Like, it's okay to do that. It took me so long to actually, okay, yeah, you can be angry, but you don't necessarily have to yell, shout, right? The feeling is fine, but right. And I remember telling Cindu, like, it was too much for me. I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I don't want to do the course anymore. And she was like, yeah, that's fine. Like, if that's what you feel, that's fine. If you need some time to process all of this, that's good. And I'm so glad we powered through that, because it's changed my life, like all of us have said here. But I'm also like in such a better state of mind to help some of the other rescues that come through our door. I'm able to look at it more holistically. I'm able to, like also Eva pointed out, extend compassion to the humans, which I, historically haven't been able to do genuinely or organically in many situations. But yeah, I'm most grateful, and my dogs are too, for Bharcs. It's a long story, sorry.
So we've had life-changing and we've had life-saving. This is deep stuff. We're starting to get a flavor now of some of the foundatory stuff of what the Bharcs way is actually. We're going to look at that more, of course, about how fundamental that is. And what you're sharing there, I think, when we have kind of mixed cultures within ourselves, so we might have that kind of culture from home, which might be very kind of, traditionally authoritarian and quite disciplinary. We have our own kind of feelings about stuff. Then we might work in an environment that has another type of outlook. These things can get very challenging, and I think we need a map. We need a route map, really, so to kind of help us through. And clearly, Bharcs offered you that. It was that, but as you beautifully shared with us, and I'm loving the vulnerability in the room today, because I think it's important that we share our journeys in that way. It wasn't an easy route, because like you say, having those feelings of, say, feeling angry and then expressing it, we have to learn over time that those feelings are valid, but we don't have to necessarily have them drive our responses. It's about how we change our relationship with these things, and that in itself is a tricky thing for our brain to work through. So you had that moment, and it just really says to me how wonderful Cindu is, really, because I do sadly know other education providers who would probably have thrown their toys out of the pram because you had that wobble. But Cindu was like, yeah, you take your time. And I think Cindu in the back of her mind was thinking, you'll be back. You just need a bit of time here. You'll be back. And that's what you needed. Because another theme from you as well, Anushree, is this notion of safety, because your dog was saying, I still don't feel safe. Still don't feel safe. This connection isn't working. That was Milo's story there for me, for sure. That was the thing that I had to really learn about safety on his terms, not mine. Thank you so much. That's amazing. So, Jania, over to you. Yeah, let's have a look at your T-shirt, please. Show us, because that sums it all up, doesn't it?
Yeah, so it says well-behaved is not equal to well-being. And I kind of, this is something that I truly believe in, because I think we have so much emphasis on behavior while really not talking about well-being of our dogs. But to talk about my journey with Cindu, I'll talk about my journey with Cindu before I talk about my journey with Bharcs, because I met her much before she started Bharcs. I met her as a client who was struggling with two dogs, one who was quite agitated about this new puppy who had come home, and the other who was a puppy who had like this crazy energy. And we were lost because, again, Sammy, who had come to us first, and he was our first dog, we had zero idea of what dog parenting is. And I find that very interesting, because I went from there to talking about dog parenting, but I had no idea of what dog parenting is, what it means to be a caregiver to a dog, what it means to be meeting the needs of a dog. Because when we brought in Sammy, we went to the same, the same thing about training, teach, sit, stay, no, and like walk, heel, whatever. And that dog was, he was tolerating of everything that we put him through, but clearly was not tolerating of the last straw, which was bringing home Zoe. And he said that this is not working out for us. And I think that kind of brought in a little bit of break in our relationship as well. He started being aloof from the family members. He was not interacting. He wasn't reactive, but he was not happy. He was irritable. He was frustrated. And that was Sammy's side of the story. And Zoe was so hyper dog, and we didn't know what to do with her energy. I remember my mother sitting on top of the sofa trying to like get away from Zoe. We were like, we have had sofas destroyed, and we didn't know what to do with her energy. And that was affecting Sammy the most, because he was her outlet. And that's when I went to Cindu, and she spoke about things that just I mean, forgive me, I'm a very like engineer, like science and logic kind of a person. So logically, it felt right for me. Like I was wondering, why wasn't anybody else talking about this? Like why nobody's putting out things in this manner? Because it just makes sense. But to be honest, I think this was in 2017, but until 2019, we couldn't really authentically implement these things because I don't think I was in a place, I don't think the environment was conducive for us. I don't think I was emotionally in a space to provide these things for my dogs. Though I think I knew about it. Rationally, I knew it that this is what I want to do. But I don't think I was in a place myself. I was struggling with my own things, my own emotional or mental health journey, my relationship with the people around me, friends and family and all of that. And I think when Cindu launched the Canine Essential 101 back in 2018, and then she said she's doing the diploma, I was like, yeah, I want to do this, but I still didn't know where it is going to lead me to. It just felt like, okay, I want to learn about dog behavior and like how to work with dogs. And I kind of was done with corporate life and like with people. So I was like, okay, dogs, that is where it is going to lead me to. But I think it led me to a completely different path. And I feel like my journey and the Bharcs journey kind of intertwined for me, like my diploma journey and my journey, they both helped each other. And the person I am today, I think both of it have contributed, extensively to what I am today. I don't think I have any more to add than whatever else, others have added in terms of, extending compassion to other people. I don't think I was, I took myself, like I was safe for myself. I think I started talking about myself the way I would talk about my dogs, and I would extend that safety for myself. I think doing that for people around us, building that relationship with people around me. I think my relationship with my family members, my parents has, become exponentially better since I have done Bharcs. I think Cindu will remember my conversations back then and conversations today about my family. And I think there's been a drastic change in that. And I think my own journey and Bharcs both have had like a huge contributing factors to it. So life changing obviously changed me as a person, changed me to be who I am today. And I think everything all of them said, and I think the biggest thing obviously is that it changed my relationship with my dogs and how I moved from becoming a dog owner to a dog parent. I think that has been the biggest change for me in the last, like I don't think, like if I truly am honest about it, I don't think I was a dog parent to Sammy for a long time. I think I became a parent to him after a long time, that I could, increase a safe space for him. I could, build our relationship, repair our relationship, because by the time Bharcs came into the picture, our relationship was already a little broken, and I had to work on fixing that. So I think all of the things that all of them spoke about, but I think for me the biggest transformation was going from a dog owner to a dog parent. I think that has been the journey for me.
Thank you for sharing that. And this is such a powerful start for me, because I think people trying to come in and think about things differently, we've got all these different voices in the room sharing a very individual story about their journey through. And what it shows is the things that we're trying to talk about in changing our relationship with behavior and training and consequences and whatever it is we're looking at. Whilst there is an academic element of it, and that's what you do brilliantly, Cindu, by the way, is bring in academic stuff to support. But this isn't about academic stuff. This is about real stuff. It's a real world thing. And I talk about, from a human psychology point of view, that there being the two types of behavior, the behavior we judge in others and the behavior we do ourselves. And when you understand the difference in those two, it starts to unravel. And actually, this is that perception shift to understand why we judge behavior in others in the way we do. And when we change that, just like you've all kind of touched upon, and we're more aware of where that comes from, and we start thinking more about the individual's lived experience, it does change our relationships, not just with our dogs and our family and our friends, but with ourselves too. Really important, powerful start to hear all these different stories about coming in. And I think it sets us up, Cindu, to getting a flavour then really about the power of Bharcs and the Bharcs way. And what I'd like to explore a little bit now is for you, what is that Bharcs way? And some of the friction you've had, I touched earlier upon maybe looking at how people might think, well, hang on, we don't know how a dog thinks and feels though, do we? And that sounds a bit anthropomorphic for me. Let's go there.
Yeah, so I think, listening to all of them, I think a few themes emerge, right? And you hear this. So repeatedly, this idea that it changed who I am. And I think that it's not to be taken lightly, because I think one of the things we do at Bharcs is to blur the line between sort of this binary, this, human exceptionalism, that somehow we are different from the rest of the animal world. And therefore we, what applies to us doesn't apply to animals, and what applies to animals don't apply to us, and kind of isolating ourselves away from it and not recognizing the continuum that we are part of. And this is not just a philosophical thing, right? In your home. I was just thinking about it the other day. When I was thinking about rights, animal rights, and not animal rights, but what are the rights of my dog in my house? What are the rights? What can she expect that is her right, that I can give to her, that I can extend to her? And we rarely think about those kind of things. We love this God complex that says, I am the savior. I have taken this dog in and I'm going to make things happen. But there are things that she expects. There are things that I can make happen. And so, but the second you start going in the direction it is, and things that they value, for instance, agency, connection, and there's a big barrier to that kind of a discussion. It's not that difficult because we have the tool built in us, and it's called empathy. It's in there. You can feel it. You can feel the pain that they have, and you can feel it in your gut. And again, the theme that emerged across everybody, right? I felt it. I felt it was wrong. I felt this was right. That feeling, that gut feeling is there for a reason. It has been given. It's an evolutionary advantage. It's there for a reason. And it is a very valid way of understanding the world. What one can actually academically call, an epistemology, a way of learning the world that does not necessarily have to come from reason. You can understand the world around you through feeling. You don't need science to know that this poor individual is in pain. You should not have to wait for science for that. You should be able to feel it in your gut and act on it. But the barrier that we have put there is, don't anthropomorphize. And I understand that we shouldn't be having sort of Homo sapien expectations of the dog. And that's probably part of the argument. Don't dress them up, don't expect them to ride a bicycle or whatever, right? Yes, but don't throw the baby out of the bathwater. Such a terrible phrase, but don't do that, right? Because emotions are not our prerogative. It is not something that was born with us. It is something we inherited from the animals that came before us. If we are just part of that continuum. And so they are likely to feel a lot of it, maybe differently, maybe even more richly than us. Who knows? They rely on intuition far more than we do. We have reasons. So maybe it has stunted our emotions. We don't know that, but there is no reason to assume and kind of shut that gate out. And the other thing that also really jumped out for me, and I would welcome people to look at this, is they repeatedly change in myself. All of them said that it changed who I am. It changed, and Anushri said, this is not an easy course. And all of them were nodding very, very emphatically. Because I think, and I was introduced to this idea of the animal mirror. Animals hold a mirror to us. And we get to look at ourselves through that mirror and understand ourselves. And I think that's what we do at Bharcs. That's kind of, I repeatedly hold that mirror up, which is, if this is your expectation of an animal, what does that tell about you? If this is what you want of an animal, this is what you want them to be, what does that tell you about who you are? And just today I was grading some paper, and this person said, yeah, I've been talking about this to my therapist. Now, I'm not suggesting that you need therapy when you do Bharcs, backbed, but I think the point is, and I think all of them will agree with this, which is that the Bharcs way is not a journey about dealing with animals. It's a journey about reflecting on yourself and your relationship with yourself, the ridiculous expectations that you're trying to live up to, and therefore are imposing it on others, including animals, the harshness that you put yourself through, and therefore don't find it problematic to put another person through it, because hey, I'm putting myself through it. And so every person's journey is going to be different, because this is a reflective journey. All of you will see yourself and only yourself, right, in that mirror. And you will see, and if you look deeply, you will see where you're hurt. You will see that broken heart. You will see the fracture inside you. And looking at that is always going to be very unpleasant to start with, but starting to repair that. And if you have to do that with a dog course, you have to blur the line, right? You have to blur the line between the dog and you. You have to have that humility. You have to allow the dog to say, you're not the expert of me. And you have to ask yourself, but why did I think I was? And then you'll realize you probably had a parent who did that to you. Ouch. And then you start the healing from there. And so I have students who do backbed who will regularly take long breaks from it, because they are now, spun off to go do a little bit of a healing journey of their own and come back. But I think the Bharcs way kind of really pushes you towards that. And the other thing that I was also thinking about is, Saujanya said, moved from dog owner to dog parent, and that's great, right? That movement is great. And I was thinking today, I've moved from dog parent to further along. I've moved into a place of like a partnership kind of a thing. And I thought I knew a lot about dogs, and I started backbed and I recruited, people into it and all of that. And then 3 years ago, my husband died and my world fell apart. And at that time, I had Chiru with me. And what Chiru did for me is, I really felt like I had been pushed into, I was asked to move out of the house. And so I moved into another house, which is kind of in the corner of the building. And it was the lockdown at the time, COVID lockdown. And I really felt like I had been pushed out of society into my corner of the world. And the only person in that corner with me was Chiru. And here was a little street dog, highly neurotic, full of her own worries, living in a world, man-made world, doesn't know how to deal, has so little agency in this human-made world. And when I collapsed and I didn't know how to pick myself up, with what little she had of herself, she would come and say, can I comfort you? Here is an individual who had so little and still knew how to give. And that was the biggest gift for me, right? It was like a blessing. Here was I was not her savior. We were showing up for each other. I wasn't the superior one here. To hell with human exceptionalism, to hell with human superiority, right? Here was an individual giving me something at my most dire moment on earth. She was giving me something that no human could. And I think I moved from the place where I felt like I could be a caregiver, to realizing that I was receiving care. We were sharing this space. We were sharing this terrified journey. I remember when we moved to the farm, there were a few days where I was put in a very difficult situation. There was one particular day where I thought there were people threatening me, and I was scared for my life, and I was scared for my dog's life. And I remember sitting there scared, and this girl was sitting next to me, and she was holding space for me. Not me holding space for her, she was holding space for me. This little vulnerable being who has nothing in the world had so much in her to hold space for a human being. What does that tell you about strength? What does that tell you about the interdependence? And I think that evolution is really at the heart of the Bharcs way. I think we start out by having these conversations, and then each person starts discovering where it takes you. And it's like an exploration into a magical forest. It takes you to places that are humbling and utterly magical.
I can't tell you how much I value sharing that and being so vulnerable there, and how profound that is for me, because I think many will relate to times when their dog has been that. And it does take it, and I've not really, even now, I'm feeling it deeply, Cindu, because I've not had that outlook for myself even, and I think, wow. I think about what Milo did for me back in the day when I lost my father, and my mother being poorly, and losing my mother, and always going, he was my constant, and how often he held my space, like you say, and so actually when we think about moving forwards even more, he was kind of my caregiver, right? You know, in those moments, and it's beautiful, and people can relate on a very deep level, and so and this is the big challenge with that anthropomorphic barrier that you want to say, really, because this is connecting on a very visceral, animal, beautiful thing that we see around us, actually, in Mother Nature, if we allow ourselves to see it, and it's there more than not. And they didn't have to be taught that. But this is the point, this notion that somehow that little young dog, or that dog that comes into our lives, if we don't put all this stuff in them, they're not going to be able to function, and they're not going to be able to do stuff. And actually, we could perhaps argue that it's the dysfunction of the humans around them in their lives that cause a lot of the challenges. Sometimes, you know, it can be a contributing factor, because, you know, if you look in Mother Nature, there's hardly any dysregulation in the adult species. They kind of get on with stuff, and they're fighting for their lives often on a daily basis. But we humans, we kind of, all the stuff we talked about today, about that straitjacket of conformity, and that kind of the expectations on us and the burdens we carry, it creates an element of dysfunction for us, where we find it hard to connect to other, whereas our dogs are willing to do it, even when they're struggling with their own stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, I think we should talk a little bit more about kind of this attachment, because I think that's the precious part of it, right? So I'll let Surabhi and Saujanya take over. Do either of you sort of want to jump in? You know, there are ideas that I've kind of, yeah, Saujanya.
I was just thinking about what you were talking in terms of connection, and during the Bharcs backbed journey, realizing parts of ourselves and, you know, what we need, and seeing that like the dogs hold mirror to us about, you know, these things. And I think you brought up attachment, and I think that was, I think, the thing that popped up for me. I think I've spoken about this before as well, where the kind of relationship I wanted to extend towards my dogs, I was not seeing it around me at all. I remember you had asked me for examples of non-transactional connection and non-transactional relationship. Like, how do you have communication without like rewards and punishment, and like there's no consequence to this? And I was at a loss of examples, because I gave Cindu quite a few examples, and I said, but this doesn't have consequences, this is communication. And then she said, no, I mean, look at this, there is consequence to this. And it kind of took me back to the idea of how parenting was done to all of us, I think, in our, you know, generation, and how I had no examples, and how can I possibly extend something to my dogs that I have nobody who modeled it around us, and, you know, nobody who was showing us how to do this. But I wanted it for me, and I wanted it for my dogs. And I think a lot of it came down to parenting, communication, and non-transactional relationship. And when I went down that path, I think a lot of attachment related conversations did come up, because when I spoke about parenting, a lot of people were asking me, why are you talking about parenting? Because, you know, why human parenting concepts are relevant to dogs. You know, they're very different. But I think we have had, I think Cindu and I think all of us here have read so much of research, but I think we've also felt very, you know, that parental attachment towards our dogs, and have seen our dogs respond in a similar manner towards us. The need for, you know, secure attachment, the need for the safe space for our dogs to be able to, deal with and cope with difficult situations. I think that kind of popped out to me because, when you spoke about mirroring, but also attachment, I think that kind of was something that really came up for me when I was talking about, or when I was doing my diploma. And then I think a lot of my journey has been around parenting, the conversations around parenting.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I think this also feels like we're in a parental role with our dogs, because I think that when you take on the Bharcs journey, and again, I think Cindu's talked about it, everybody else has talked about it, this really does become an opportunity to reparent yourself. And so what you're doing on this journey is learning how to show up for your own inner child, which is then also mirrored by your dog. And so it's this really lovely overlapping experience of parenting and being parented in a very different manner. And so I think that as you're on that journey, you realize that you can give yourself very different things than what you experienced growing up. And in being able to give yourself that, I think you just want to share it with other people. And so you start sharing it with your dog, you start sharing it with your partners, you start sharing it with other family members, you start sharing it with your friends, because it's too lovely to keep it all with yourself, right? And so I think that's also where so much of the parenting shift comes in, because for me, I think, again, in my own journey, I think that's been a really big, I think one of the gifts that Bharcs has given is that opportunity to reparent myself. And again, I think very much like Cindu said, of course, therapy is a great way to sort of synthesize it and make sense of it and not put the pressure on Cindu to do the healing. But I think it does go very beautifully hand in hand. Yeah.
Yeah. And quite honestly, I think the healing journey, for me with you guys and for you with the dogs, I think this healing is almost contagious. When you heal in that process, and when I witness your healing, I'm healing. When we witness and empower and enable healing for our dogs, we are healing, right? And it's contagious. Eva, Anushri, we're kind of running close to end of time. So let's hear, you guys have any thoughts? Also on this idea of kind of reflexivity, right? We're kind of bringing in what we, our personal journeys in there. Parking aside judgment and bringing in our personal journeys and saying, willing to say that I'm going to do this. I'm not afraid of this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to really take this head on and face who have I been in all this hurt versions of ourselves. Who have we ended up being to ourselves and to those around us? Quite a tough one.
That's a good one. I was actually thinking about this the other day, because as I've been on this journey, I started to learn how to decipher what is my opinion on someone's behavior that would otherwise trigger me, and what is my genuine feeling about it? Like, am I genuinely triggered about it, right? And when I've had to do that and pause and actually, it's so many times it's been a conditioned trigger. It's genuinely doesn't, when I think about it now and I take a step back and ask myself, why is this irritating me that my dog is doing this, for example, right? And I would stop and I think many of you alluded to this earlier, but when I stop and ask myself, what about this is actually irritating me? Why is this bothering me, right? Okay, so my dog doesn't want to do what I'm saying. Why does that bother me? Right? When we first started Bharcs, and I was like, actually it doesn't. I don't mind if my dog actually doesn't listen to me. It was, but when I grew up, I didn't have that. You had to listen. It's almost like if you don't listen, you are being an annoyance or an irritant to somebody, right? So there's this natural sense of, oh, this triggers me. But now I'm like, actually doesn't. And I cannot tell you the stress-free life it has led to, because now I'm like even this like today, and I remember, Cindu, something that you and I were talking about, where I was trying to ask one of our rescued pugs to, hey, can I put a harness on you? Because, some of them, when they first come to us, they're a bit scared of, So I was like, I remember, and you said, hey, it's a good video. And in the video, she's playing around. She knows what I'm asking off of her, but she's like, it's a bit uncomfortable for me. And I remember like giving her that space, saying, yeah, that's fine, take your time. And then she comes around saying, okay, fine, I know you got to put it if we have to go for a walk. And Cindu told me when she's looking at the video, she said, it's a nice video, but why didn't you like encourage her playfulness? Like she's being a bit like shy about, scared. And it's okay, like be in that moment and enjoy that moment with her, right? And today that happened again with Snow and Luna, and there was some birds fighting outside, and they really didn't want to come in, right? Something like, guys, come on, let's go. Like, you guys are just psyching yourself out. Let's go inside. And they didn't want to go, right? Like she went in and then she came back immediately out. So I know like she's struggling with this thing of, yeah, I know, but I really want to be here right now. And I was thinking, okay, yeah, let's just stand here for a couple of minutes. I'll sit with you. Let's watch this together. And then a few seconds, she's like, okay, yeah, I'm done now. Now we can go in. But it was so special because it felt like we were in this thing together, and we were experiencing this thing together. And it's not like she doesn't want to listen to me. It's so stupid to think that it's about me in the first place, right? I think that's the whole problem. Like everything needs to be like, oh, it's like centered around me. And when you like, and I think Bharcs teaches you to like realize that you're really not that important. Like chill a little bit. And I think, yeah, that's just what I wanted to share.
I'll just say something very quickly on that, because what I heard from you there, our brain is kind of wired really to have some form of control over outcome of the world around us. When we let go of control of others, we limit the control others have on us. Actually, it is truly freeing, I think, when we can be and allow that process to happen. Sorry to bump in there. Eva.
Yeah, no, it's like what I think the message of Bharcs is, like, at least for me, the others will tell if they agree, but it's giving every individual, be it a person, a dog, to be who they are, accepting them who they are, giving them space to, for example, with clients, yes, we can like carry the message, but it's on them when they are ready to accept that message, to internalize it, because it's not like teaching, like training, like sit, heal. It's a way of life. It's so yeah, and it comes with difficult like questions that you have to answer, because when you move in a perception where a dog is not an object, but it is somebody, that then raises a question: if they have similar feelings to ours, how can we, like, why do we treat them the way that we are? And that are very difficult questions. And some people arrive at the other end quicker than others, and extending that compassion, I think, is very important, and holding that space, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I think you kind of touched upon something important there, right? Which is the idea of attributing personhood. We stop kind of looking at them as an object. We stop othering them, and we actually say, can we extend the idea of personhood to this individual? And what does that mean? Then you go from looking at them as property to actually looking at them as sentient beings with feelings, and you're open to, and therefore, I think this journey becomes less and less about the individual, and really I forget who was the philosopher who spoke about this, the individual. You are not you by yourself, but you become somebody in the presence of those around you. So Tim Engel talks about this idea, that we're constantly becoming fresh and new, but we are not becoming, but we're co-becoming. We're not beings. We're not set in stone. We are not what we are born to be, but we are becoming constantly. and we're co-becoming in the presence of those around us. And so I think our dogs, quite honestly, we are all here because our dogs made us do that. And at the end of this conversation, we all have some new ideas. We are all a slightly newer version of who we were 1 hour ago. And everybody listening to us, you are here because of your dogs, and you are slightly new. And I think that is really the Bharcs journey, which is to say, this is not about the other. This is about you and your dog becoming something new, and in the process influencing those around you. And so it really is so critical for us that you can walk that journey only when you're ready to. We can't really make it happen. And so I can't give you a set of steps. And people keep saying, oh, but operationalize this. No, I can't. I can't operationalize how you repair relationships. That is a deeply personal journey. It depends on you. I mean, you have to figure out how to repair your relationship with yourself and with those around you who fractured it for you. And then you start seeing how it makes sense with dogs, or you do it with dogs first and then extend it to human beings. And so it's such a deeply entangled thing, right? And it's a continuous journey. It's not a summit and you reach it and you're like, I have reached the top of the summit and now I shall preach. It's really not the case. It's, you learn a few things and then you move along. I think I am who I am today, and I'm still a better version of what I was 6 months ago, 1 year ago. I still have new ideas. I still have new experiences that molds me, and keeping ourselves open to that and allowing ourselves to receive, and not having that arrogance to say, oh, I shall only receive from those I perceive to be better than me. And, we're going to have this hierarchy, and those who are better than me, I shall receive. And then the rest I shall talk down to. I think opening ourselves to listen to what a dog has to say can start teaching us that there is, if you open yourself, there's a lot that can happen.
It reminds me of the quote that it's not about seeking new landscapes, but about looking at things with new eyes. And I think it's the invitation of that mindset shift. And that's why it is so hard. One of the things we're inviting people to consider is moving away from the kind of blueprint, shopping list, cookie cutter approach. And it allows us actually to connect more, like you said, Cindu, a big thing today is this reconnection to self, and how much we disconnect from self because of the narratives of others and the control we feel about things. And this has been a really amazing start for me, because I think it's given everybody a chance. Just looking in, when you watch this back, anybody kind of watching in now, and you in the room as well, if you're watching back, when you were sharing individual stories, that I could see a bit of the pain in your faces, actually, because you're reliving. You're not that anymore. You're this, but when we had the second half, when we were coming, the smiles in the room and the glow, and like you said, Cindu, it's infectious because you feel it again. And I think that's a big indicator of what this journey does. I think it just shifts through. So it's a beautiful chat, great place to start. Now, tomorrow we get the chance to invite you all in to really deep dive for us into some stuff. We can look at some different topics. Have you got some teasers there, Cindu, about where we might be going tomorrow?
Oh, yeah. So we'd love to talk about something that this is our wheelhouse, which is talking about street dogs. And I think street dogs are really important sort of protagonists in what we do, because these are animals that come in and fiercely hold on to their agency. And so we are kind of brought to our knees when, all our control tools and techniques are not really going to fly in the face of a street dog who's going to tell you, yeah, I don't like that. Bye. I won't see you again. I have a choice to do that. And so you really have to bring your most polite, most enlightened version of yourself there, and most amount of humility. And so we're going to talk about street dogs. We're going to touch upon a very sensitive topic, which is the idea of nature versus culture. I think that's a huge part of what, our thought processes are kind of set in certain molds because of this. And then we're going to also look at the pillars of the Bharcs way. So what do we kind of build our ideas on? I mean, we can talk a lot about this, but what does it translate into action? What are the pillars that we have that kind of help us to start navigating this space? Of course, it's still going to be a personal journey, but, some practical things that we can start with. Anushree works with shelter dogs. So she's always about, let's get practical. I don't want all this philosophy. And I love that, right? I really love that everybody brings such a different flavor to this. And then we're also going to talk about a few myths about the Bharcs way. We'll touch upon that again at the end of the season. But I think people kind of look at what we do and can get carried away a little bit and have, again, these are coming from biases of, other than positive training, what else is there? And then you can kind of get carried away. So we'll talk about a little bit of that as well, and then take it from there.
Well, brilliant. And we've had some great comments in the chat. Thank you for those who can do the chat. Super conversation. What a way to start this. Thank you, everyone, for the lovely conversation. Very inspiring to watch. This is beautiful. Lots of stuff here. I know from Bharcs, I still took away so much from this conversation. I even teared up at some points. All of you rock. So this is great. And thank you for everybody who's come. Thank you. Thank you all. Sadly, won't be here for tomorrow. Don't worry, there will be a replay. And I know how busy lives are. And I think to have so many people here live, especially because it's on a different platform, I'm really pleased about that. Well, Bharcs ladies, we need to have a tour t-shirt done. I think that would be great.
Yeah, and you need one of those as well. So, I'm coming in November. We'll get the t-shirt done and I'll bring you one, Andy. Thank you so much for inviting us and giving us the space to develop these ideas. Because like I said, this is not something we do in isolation. This is something we do together. And the more people who join the conversation, the richer our conversation gets as well. And so you and other people that you've kind of recruited into it play such a critical role in building out this idea. It's not my brainchild or our brainchild, right? It's just relationship stuff. I mean, and I think it's time that we all heal ourselves and kind of get on with that already. And so let's do that for ourselves.
Sure, and we need to do that. And I think this is the thing about, this is definitely what I've looked at doing with the dog-centered care platform, I think. But a lot of these conversations historically have been batted away or has been seen as being an add-on. Rather than the shift is actually, it's not the add-on, it's the central bit. The other stuff's the add-on, actually. Great, what a great start. It's been amazing. I feel really inspired. I love you all. And thank you all for being so vulnerable and opening up and sharing about those journeys. Because again, I don't know about you, but sometimes people rewrite their journeys a little bit. They don't want to kind of publicly show that maybe they were here and now they're there. It's always a bit better to think, I was always here. I definitely wasn't here. Oh my God, I'm learning all the time. And I learn from people like yourselves. And that's the big joy of dog-centered care for me. I get to talk to all these wonderful people, and I think it's really amazing. And the only thing that is unique is our own individual lived experience. That's the one thing we can truly validate. And also how we filter this information and how we discuss it. That's our thing. But like you said, Cindu, we need many voices because the lived experience is a complicated one. And as you said also earlier, which I think is a really valid thing I want to finish on, and especially for you, Cindu, who shares a lot of the science, because we want the science there, but to recognize that actually whilst we must look at the objective, we must also embrace the subjective and the anecdotal, because that's where the richness of the lived experience lies, even if it's just a study of that dog. Yeah, I think that's a beautiful thing for us to remember sometimes, because I think science has been weaponized a little bit at times, and I think that's important. Great. Well, tomorrow, same time, same place, as they say, and maybe Sarjan will have another t-shirt for us tomorrow with a different message. I don't know whether you have a selection, but that's a good one to have, and I'm quite jealous of it. Great. Okay, we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you, everybody, for joining in. Thank you for your lovely comments, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Bye. Thank
you.
Thank you
Thank you so much.